There's a moment right before everything changes. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand your attention. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. And yet, this moment holds more power than words ever could, because in that moment, you stop speaking. You stop reacting. You simply become silent. Now here's the truth most people never realize. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not avoidance. In the teachings of Gautama Buddha, silence is something far deeper. It is clarity. It is control. It is awakening. Think about your daily life for a second. Noise is everywhere. Notifications, opinions, arguments, endless talking, both outside and inside your mind. You wake up, and before your feet even touch the ground, your mind is already speaking. What do I need to do? What if something goes wrong? Why did they say that to me? Your thoughts don't pause. Your emotions don't wait. And slowly, without realizing it, you become trapped in noise. But Buddhism teaches something radically different. It says, the more you speak, the less you truly understand. The more you react, the less you truly see. And the more noise you create, the further you move away from peace. There's a story often shared in Buddhist teachings. A young monk once asked his master, "Why do I feel restless all the time, even when I'm doing nothing?" The master didn't answer. Instead, he poured tea into a cup. He kept pouring, even after the cup was full. The tea spilled over, running across the table. The monk quickly said, "Stop, the cup is already full." The master finally looked at him and said, "Exactly, and so is your mind." This is a condition most of us live in, a mind that is constantly full of noise, full of reactions, full of unnecessary words. And here's the hidden cost. When your mind is full, you cannot see clearly. You cannot feel deeply. You cannot live peacefully. Silence in Buddhism is not about forcing yourself to stop talking. It is about creating space. Space between your thoughts. Space between your emotions. Space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you begin to see something incredible. You begin to see yourself. Modern life teaches you to express everything. Say what you feel. React instantly. Defend your opinions. But the Buddha taught something more powerful. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every emotion needs to be acted upon. Not every moment requires a reaction. Because sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Imagine someone criticizes you. Your first instinct is to react, to defend, to argue, to prove them wrong. But what happens if you don't? What happens if you simply stay silent? Not in suppression, not in fear, but in awareness. Something shifts. You begin to observe instead of react. You begin to understand instead of fight. You begin to rise instead of collapse. This is what Buddhist psychology reveals. Silence breaks the cycle of suffering, because suffering doesn't come from events themselves. It comes from how we react to them. And reaction thrives in noise. But silence interrupts the pattern. When you are silent, you are no longer controlled by impulse. You are no longer pulled by every emotion. You are no longer trapped in automatic behavior. Instead, you become the observer. And in Buddhism, this is the beginning of awakening. But here's the part most people struggle with. Silence feels uncomfortable because when the noise disappears, you are left alone with yourself, your thoughts, your fears, your insecurities. And for many people, this is the scariest place to be. That's why people avoid silence. They distract themselves with social media, with conversations, with constant stimulation, anything to avoid facing what's inside. But Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not the enemy. It is the doorway, because on the other side of silence is understanding. On the other side of silence is emotional freedom. On the other side of silence is a mind that is no longer controlled by chaos. The Buddha himself often remained silent when asked certain questions. not because he didn't know the answer, but because some truths cannot be explained in words. They must be experienced, and silence is the path to that experience. So here's a question for you. When was the last time you truly experienced silence? Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of inner noise? No overthinking, no reacting, no mental chaos, just presence. If your answer is rarely or never, you're not alone, but that also means something powerful. You have access to a level of peace that most people never touch. There is something about silence that most people completely underestimate. They think silence is passive. They think it means doing nothing. They think it makes you invisible. But in reality, silence is one of the most powerful forms of control you will ever experience. Not control over others, but control over yourself. And according to the teachings inspired by Gautama Buddha, self-mastery is the highest form of power. Let's go deeper. Your mind operates in patterns, automatic reactions, emotional triggers, conditioned responses built over years. Someone raises their voice, you feel attacked. Someone ignores you, you feel rejected. Something goes wrong, you feel anxious. And before you even realize it, you react instantly, emotionally, unconsciously. But here's what Buddhist psychology reveals. Between every trigger and your reaction, there's a space, a small, almost invisible space. And that space, that's where your power lives. Silence expands that space. When you choose silence, even for a few seconds, you interrupt the automatic chain reaction. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of being controlled, you observe. Instead of losing yourself, you return to yourself. This is what mindfulness truly is. Not just meditation, not just breathing techniques, but awareness in real time, awareness in the middle of chaos, awareness in the middle of emotion, awareness in the middle of life. And silence is the gateway to that awareness. There's another story from Buddhist tradition. A monk once struggled with anger. No matter how much he practiced, he would still get triggered easily. One day, he went to his teacher and said, "I try to control my anger, but I keep failing." The teacher responded, "Next time anger arises, do nothing." The monk was confused. "Do nothing?" The teacher nodded. "Don't speak. Don't act. Just watch." So the monk tried. The next time someone insulted him, he felt the anger rising. His heart raced. His thoughts exploded. But instead of reacting, he stayed silent. Something unexpected happened. The anger passed. Not immediately, not easily, but it didn't control him. For the first time, he experiences emotion without becoming it. This is the hidden transformation silence creates. You stop identifying with every thought. You stop becoming every emotion. Instead, you witness them. And when you can witness something, you are no longer controlled by it. This is what modern psychology now confirms as well. When you pause instead of react, you activate a different part of your brain, a calmer, more rational state. But Buddhism discovered this thousands of years ago, without machines, without research labs, just through deep observation of the human mind. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. Silence doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how others perceive you. In a world where everyone is talking, the one who remains silent stands out. Not as weak, but as grounded. Not as passive, but as controlled. Not as absent, but as deeply present. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered. They don't rush to speak. They don't react impulsively. They listen. They observe. They choose their words carefully. Because they understand something most people don't. Words can create noise, but silence creates impact. When you are silent, people pay attention. When you don't react, people become curious. When you stay calm, people feel your presence. This is what we call quiet power, and it cannot be faked. It comes from inner stillness. But let's be clear about something important. Silence is not suppression. It's not about holding everything inside until you explode later. That's not wisdom. That's avoidance. True silence is conscious. It's aware. It's intentional. It's grounded. You are not ignoring your emotions. You are observing them without being consumed. And over time, something incredible happens. Your reactions become slower. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become lighter. You stop overthinking every situation. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop needing validation from others, because silence reconnects you to something deeper than thought, something more stable than emotion, something more real than external approval. In Buddhism, this is often described as inner stillness, a state where your mind is no longer constantly moving, where your identity is no longer tied to every passing thought, where your peace is no longer dependent on the outside world. And once you taste this state, even for a moment, you begin to understand something profound. You don't need more noise to feel complete. You need less. But here's the challenge. The world will constantly try to pull you back into noise. It will demand your attention. It will trigger your emotions. It will test your patience. And that's exactly where your practice begins. Not in isolation, not in perfect conditions, but in real life. When someone interrupts you, pause. When something frustrates you, pause. When your mind starts racing, pause. And in that pause, choose silence, even if it's just for a few seconds. Because every moment of silence is a moment of freedom. Freedom from reaction, freedom from chaos, freedom from unconscious living. There comes a point in life when you realize something unsettling. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not every situation deserves your energy. Not every thought deserves your attention. And yet, most people live as if everything does. They speak when they're emotional. They react when they're triggered. They argue when they feel misunderstood. And slowly, without noticing it, they lose their inner peace. But in the teachings inspired by Gautama Buddha, there's a deeper understanding. Peace is not something you find in the world. Peace is something you protect within yourself. And silence is a shield. Let's go deeper into something most people never think about. Your mind is not your enemy, but it can become your prison. Because every time you react instantly, you reinforce mental noise. Every argument you engage in, every emotional explosion, every impulsive reaction, it all adds more weight to your inner world. And over time, that weight becomes exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion. The kind that makes you tired even after resting. The kind that makes you feel overwhelmed for no clear reason. The kind that makes life feel too much. But silence begins to reverse this process. Slowly, gently, naturally. When you choose silence instead of reaction, you stop feeding the chaos. When you pause instead of respond immediately, you break the cycle of emotional repetition. When you observe instead of judge, you begin to heal. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes deeply psychological, because silence doesn't just change behavior, it changes identity. You stop being someone who reacts to everything. You start becoming someone who observes everything. You stop being pulled by emotions. You start witnessing emotions. You stop living inside the storm. You start watching it pass. And here's the most powerful realization. The storm was never permanent. It only felt permanent because you were inside it. Silence gives you distance. And distance gives you clarity. And clarity gives you freedom. There's another teaching often connected to Buddhist meditation practice. Most suffering is not created by events. It is created by interpretation. Someone says something doesn't go your way. Plans collapse. And the mind immediately adds meaning. This is bad. This shouldn't happen. This means something is wrong with me. But silence interrupts that automatic storytelling. When you remain silent internally, you stop adding unnecessary meaning. You start seeing things as they are, not as your mind fears them to be. This is emotional liberation, not by changing the world, but by changing your relationship with it. And here's something even deeper. Silence doesn't make you less expressive. It makes your expression more powerful. Because when you finally speak from silence, your words carry weight. They are not scattered. They are not emotional overflow. They are intentional. In a noisy world, intentional words are rare, and rarity creates impact. Think about it. Who has more influence? The person who speaks constantly, or the person who speaks only when necessary? The answer is obvious, because silence builds presence, and presence is more powerful than volume. But there's a stage in silence that goes even deeper, a stage where you are no longer trying to control reactions, because reactions naturally slow down, a stage where you are no longer fighting thoughts, because thoughts lose their grip, a stage where peace is not something you chase, but something you embody. This is what Buddhist practice calls inner stillness, not emptiness, not numbness, not detachment from life, but a deep, grounded awareness that remains steady regardless of external chaos. At this stage, life still happens. Problems still appear. People still act unpredictably. Emotions still arise. But something inside you changes. You are no longer shaken the same way. And that is the true power of silence. Not escaping life, but becoming unshaken within it. There is a simple truth most people overlook. You cannot control everything around you, but you can control how quickly you react. And in that control, you find your freedom. Silence is not the absence of life. It is the mastery of response. It is the moment between trigger and reaction, where you reclaim your power. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. At first, it feels difficult. Then it feels intentional. And eventually, it becomes your nature. You begin to notice something subtle. You don't rush to reply. You don't rush to judge. You don't rush to fix everything. You simply observe, breathe, and respond with clarity. And life starts feeling different, lighter, slower, more meaningful. Because silence has a hidden effect. It returns you to yourself, not the version shaped by stress, not the version shaped by expectations, not the version shaped by reactions, but the real you underneath it all. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just calm your mind. It transforms your entire way of being, not temporarily, not emotionally, but deeply, permanently. By now, you've seen something important. Silence is not empty. Silence is not passive. Silence is not weakness. It is awareness. It is strength. It is mastery. And in the deeper teachings inspired by Gautama Buddha, silence is often a final step before understanding life itself. Because only when a mind becomes quiet does reality become clear. Think about your life for a moment. How many problems were made worse simply because of reaction? How many misunderstandings grew because of words spoken too quickly? How many moments of peace were lost because silence was not chosen? Most suffering is not created by life. It is created by the speed of the mind, and silence slows that speed down, not by force, not by suppression, but by awareness. When silence becomes your practice, something subtle begins to shift. You no longer feel the need to explain everything. You no longer feel the need to defend everything. You no longer feel the need to prove everything. Because inner peace starts speaking louder than ego. And this is where true letting go begins. Not emotional collapse. Not withdrawal from life. Not avoidance, but acceptance. You begin to see people as they are, not as you expect them to be. You begin to see situations as they are, not as your fear interprets them. You begin to see yourself without judgment, and slowly, the grip of mental suffering loosens. There's a final truth hidden in Buddhist wisdom. The mind that is always talking cannot hear truth, but the mind that becomes silent can finally understand it. Because truth does not arrive through noise. It arrives through stillness. And when you reach this point, you stop chasing peace. You realize something deeper. Peace was never missing. It was always covered by noise. Silence doesn't create peace. It reveals it. Now imagine this. a life where you don't react instantly, a life where you don't carry unnecessary emotional weight, a life where your mind is not constantly fighting itself, a life where you can simply observe, breathe, and respond with clarity. That life is not imaginary. It is available right now in the space of silence. And the more you return to that space, the more natural it becomes. You stop being pulled by every emotion. You stop being controlled by every thought. You stop living in constant mental noise. Instead, you start living from awareness. And awareness changes everything. It changes how you speak. It changes how you listen. It changes how you love. It changes how you exist. Because silence is not just about not speaking. It is about being fully present without disturbance. And when you reach this state, you begin to notice something profound. Life was never the problem. Your reaction to life was. So now the practice is simple. Not easy, but simple. Pause before reacting. Observe before judging. Breathe before responding. And return again and again to silence. Because every moment of silence is a moment of returning to yourself. And as this journey comes to an end, it is really not an ending at all. It is a beginning of awareness, a beginning of clarity, a beginning of inner freedom. And now, as you carry this understanding forward, remember this: silence is not something you do once. It is something you live. Thank you for watching and staying until the end. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more deep Buddhist wisdom and mindful teachings. This is Wisdom Hub Buddha, and I'll see you in the next moment of awareness.